Although you've talked a lot about this in the past and different aspects of it, when you started the NWO, how important was it for, you talk a lot about things feeling real. How important was it that it went very far to make people think it was real? Kevin Nash and Scott Hall would come through the crowd, security would be there, they'd have baseball bats. There was a lot of things that you did to make it feel real. How important was that to that angle reaching the status that it did?
It was absolutely important. Look, when I was given the task of creating Nitro, it wasn't a choice. I didn't go to Ted Turner and ask for it. I was told, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go head-to-head with WWE in prime time. Oh, that's not at all what I was hoping to hear. But once I was given that challenge, I knew that I could do one of three things. I had three options. I could try to be better at the WWE, at what the WWE did at that time, which was pretty much a PG, cartoon, animated, kids-oriented show. If you go back and watch it pre-1992, 93, 94, 95, pre-Nitro, that's kind of what it was. I could either try to be better than them at that. I could try to be different than them and satisfy the audience in a different way, or I would, by default, just be worse. So I really only had two choices. I can either be better than them, or I can be worse than them, or I could be different. I opted to be different. And I literally sat in a room and made a list of every single, by myself, little legal yellow pad and a pen. Didn't even have a computer at the time. I sat down, I just wrote notes. Said, okay, what are they? What is the WWF at that time? What are their personality traits? What are the characteristics? Okay, they're tape show. I'm live. They're a kids show. They're highly animated, kind of goofy characters that kids really like. I can't go after that audience. They're too good at what they do, so I'm going to go after 18 to 34-year-olds. They're very scripted, kind of goofy. I'm going to be reality. They're pretty predictable, very well polished. I'm going to make people go, what the hell? That wasn't supposed to happen. And keep the audience off base. So there's a whole list of things. Some of them made sense, some of them didn't. But I started with that list. And my goal was to do everything as different as it's ever been done as I possibly could. And it was really simple, really, because wrestling had been presented in such a very, I don't want to say unsophisticated, but in a very predictable way for such a long time. It got bigger, the lighting got better, they had more cameras, the music got better, they brought George Liberace in. They did a lot of stuff, but in celebrities, not picking on George Liberace, but it was the formula was very obvious. So I thought, okay, well, if I just do shit that no one's ever seen before, it'll make them go, what the hell is that? And that's all I wanted. All I wanted the audience to do was go, what the hell was that? That never happens. Well, if it never happens, then it must be real. If it's not predictable, then it wasn't planned. And if it wasn't planned, holy crap, this is different. And that's why Scott Hall coming down through the crowd, interrupting a match in the middle of a match on a live show. That had never been done before. Nobody ever saw that before. Come down, step over the rail, and cut a promo like he wasn't even invited. That never happened before. And that's an example, it's an obvious example, but there was a lot of other ones. Rey Mysterio getting lawn darted into the side of a production truck, backstage. Nobody ever used to show the backstage area of a wrestling event before. I did. I made the backstage area a part of the set. Prior to that, it was always confined to the ring or a little interview set off to the side or maybe in a back room. Nobody ever showed the production guys sitting in a truck calling the show while two guys walked in there and slapped them in the side of the head. That never happened. So all of those little things are the things that made Nitro work. It's the things that made NWO work. Because it wasn't that it was that brilliant. It's just that it was different. That's all.
And the WWE's narrative of WCW is maybe not what everyone sees WCW as, but one of the things that they accuse you of in DVDs and documentaries and things is that you unfairly raided their talent. You unfairly gave away results on TV. And you have an answer to that. You have your own response to that. So how do you respond to that narrative that they tell?
Well, the two questions are, did I steal their talent? Hell no, I didn't steal their talent. Like I said earlier, they came to me. It's not like I sat in a room with a list of every, the WWE roster at the time and everybody's phone numbers. I said, okay, let's just start calling these guys and see if they'll jump ship and offer them more money. That's what they'd like you to believe happened. It's not what happened at all. Number one. Number two, when talent did come over, like Randy Savage, Hulk Hogan had left WWF. He had retired. They parted company. Vince and Hulk didn't get along at the time. Vince washed his hands of Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan was off doing movies and TV shows. So it's not like I stole Hulk Hogan. Christ, he was sitting on the side of the road looking for something to do. Cool, I'll do that. And the same with a lot of guys in that category. But if you look back at the history of WWF, look at what Vince McMahon did to guys that I grew up with in the wrestling business, at least. Vern Gagne, Don Owen, Jerry Jarrett, guys down in Florida. He went around and cherry-picked all of the best talent he could, made them deals that they couldn't refuse and shouldn't have refused, in all fairness, and they left their territories and their commitments in some cases, including Hulk Hogan's, according to Vern Gagne. Just left. Bobby Heenan, Gene Okerlund, you name it. Vince McMahon didn't create those guys. He offered those guys an opportunity that was better than they had at that moment. I don't consider that stealing. But when the WWE talks about Eric Bischoff, and when Eric Bischoff did the same exact thing, I offered people an opportunity. All of a sudden, when I do it, I steal everybody's talent. I'm using Ted Turner's money to put WWE out of business. It wasn't true. It just wasn't true at all. People have it, and I'm also going to say I'm friends with Scott and Kevin, okay? So I don't want to say anything that stirs up that doesn't need to be stirred up. However, I will tell you that I disagree with that narrative that's out there, that because of the fake Diesel and fake Scott Hall, that somehow that made me go into a panic and I decided to offer them more money. It's a very interesting story to tell. I ain't buying it. That angle in WWE, in fact, I did a debate with Bruce Pritchard. I don't know if any of you or how many of you know who Bruce is, but at the time, I know Bruce is a close friend. He's one of my closest friends, so I don't mean that. But, I don't know how much you guys know about
What was that laugh about Bruce Pritchard? I don't get it.
He's a good man. He's one of the best people I've come to be friends with in the wrestling business. But at the time, Bruce was Vince's right-hand man. He was in every meeting. He was in every creative decision. He was a part of everything that went on. He was a confidant to Vince McMahon. And Bruce Pritchard will tell the story if you ever get a chance to bring him here. Ask him that same question. And he'll tell you that was an idea that was created by an attorney called Jerry McDivitt, who, by the way, I spent a lot of time sitting across a table from in federal lawsuits and trademark depositions. So I got to know him kind of well, unfortunately. It didn't turn out good. But the idea was created by Jerry McDivitt for no other reason to establish to the court and to support their lawsuit that since they owned the character of Diesel and Razor Ramon, that they could still use them however they wanted to, and for us to infringe upon that character added value to their lawsuit position. That's where that idea came from. And no, I did not offer anybody more money for it. Ted Turner and I looked at that, and there was other people in the room. It wasn't just Ted and I, but we looked at that videotape and laughed our asses off. Nobody panicked. So I don't know how that story got started, and I'm sure in some people's minds it may have been true. Some people convinced themselves of things that wasn't true, but in their minds is. I don't know. I can only tell you how I felt at that time, and I didn't write any checks because of it. As I alluded to early when we first started this thing, when you're a talent you're driven differently than the average person. And I've worked in factories. I've almost had, I can almost say I've had a job beginning with every letter in the alphabet. I haven't worked at a zoo yet. I might knock that one off before I'm done, just to finish stuff out. The Q, I can't figure that one out. There's a couple other letters, but just about I've had a lot of different jobs in my life. But the one thing I will say, because I've done a lot of stuff, from digging ditches, I've done that. When you're talent, you're driven a little differently than the average person, and sometimes you're a little different to get along with. Some of it is a sense of insecurity, especially in the wrestling business, especially back in the 80s, or 60s, 70s, 80s, even into the 90s. It was a very, very competitive business, and nobody was really supporting each other because everybody wanted everybody else's position. Everybody wanted to advance themselves, because that was the nature of the business at that time. That was the culture. It wasn't a bad thing, it was just the way it was. So because of that, there were times when a lot of guys were hard to get along with, and I can't pinpoint which one was the hardest, to be very honest with you. I know you'd like to hear that, because people like that kind of stuff, and like to tweet it and read about it. And I know it's not exciting to hear, but I'm not going to lie to you. It was the truth to me. There were times when I wanted to, Kevin Nash and I would, it wouldn't get physical, because I wouldn't be sitting here tonight if it did. But there were times when I was confident that it was going to go that way, and I was prepared for it to go that way. He was horrible, but he was also sometimes my closest confidant, because I recognized that, you get the good with the challenging. There were times when Bill Goldberg made me want to chew my own leg off and beat myself with it. But that doesn't mean he was a bad person. It just means he was, doing what he thought was best for him at that time, and he was a very passionate, driven person.
What kind of stuff was it over?
Almost always creative. It was creative. Almost creative and money always went hand in hand, because talent was smart. They knew the better they were positioned storyline-wise, the more dependent we were upon them because of a story, the more committed we were to them because of where we were going in the long run, the more leverage they had. And much like, the story with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash and the fake Diesel and fake Ramon, the truth is, we may have been negotiating with them at that time, and I may have given them more money, but it's not because of that. Those guys never made, I'm not going to talk about really too often how much money people made, because in most cases, I don't freaking remember, number one. I had 140 guys working for me under contract at one time. I didn't write the contracts myself, so I can't remember exactly. But in general, I will tell you that very few people made more than $1.5 million. I mean, a small handful. And a lot of those guys came in making $600,000, $700,000. Scott and Kevin came in making somewhere probably around $700,000 to $750,000 a year, because Sting was my highest paid guy at the time, and I couldn't afford to pay guys a lot more than him. So the bar was set, no matter how good somebody was. Hulk Hogan was the exception to that. But usually the arguments it was a nexus of creative discussion with the idea in mind that there was a financial commitment involved.